All right, we are here on the SchmearCast. Karsten and I just talked through The Brutalist. We're really excited to be joined by the cinematographer of the film, Lowell Crawley. He's worked with Brady Corbet on his other films as well, like Childhood of a Leader and Vox Lux. Lowell, welcome to the SchmearCast. We are so excited to have you. How you doing today?
Thank you. I'm excited to be here too. Yeah, doing okay.
So you and Brady do Childhood of a Leader together. You do Vox Lux starring Natalie Portman. And at the wrap of that film, he hands you a book about brutalist architecture and says, "This is what we're doing next." And I want to know from you, what were your first impressions of this art form and this architectural style?
Well, I mean, even prior to that, my first impressions were how wonderful to have a collaborator that we wrap a movie on, and we wrap a movie, and he's like, "This is the next one." I mean, as anyone who works with collaborators knows, it's not always as easy as that. So that was my first impression was sort of very grateful that we have that relationship. I'm very thankful that we have that relationship. And then it was this book called The Brutal World, and it was a sort of a sort of an introduction to, or sort of a compilation, as it were, of works by brutalist architects. And I think the earliest kind of conversation was about how do you take moving image as an art form and use it to explore architecture, which is by definition sort of inanimate, and I think a lot of our conversations were, well, not necessarily immediately, but as things developed, and as I got the script, and as I started to realize that Laszlo Toth's work was kind of became manifest in the second half of the film. Really, the conversation was about how does one move through the space? How does one experience it? Any architecture. How does one take the camera and use the camera to convey what it feels like for a human to experience his Laszlo's art form, and so really that was about kind of the height of the camera, the field of view of the lens, the speed at which one moves through. So a lot of our discussions were about that, really.
The architecture obviously plays a major role in the film, so much so that I almost see it as like another character in it. And I feel like the narrative in a way reflects the architecture style. I'm wondering, does the cinematography do the same? Were you at all influenced by the architecture in the way you chose to shoot the film?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I would say the awareness of light, I think, would be a really important thing to discuss, which is, like, it's interesting, like Laszlo Toth's design for the institute is half subterranean, so it's kind of like these almost cell-like spaces, as are described by the end of the movie, in the last sort of 10-15 minutes of the movie. So they exist, it's almost denied of light, and then the top of the institute is like any brutalist piece of art, brutalist architecture, or any piece of architecture for that matter, has to be very aware of the light. And for Laszlo, it becomes clear at the very end of the movie that some of the rooms within the institute directly a direct sort of correlations, and have the exact dimensions of his spaces in Dachau, in the concentration camps. And the only thing he changes is the height of the, and in some way that's a way of kind of reclaiming and liberating himself from those
Right.
constraints. So
Literally transcending the
it
the levels of it.
exactly. So I was kind of continually aware of that. It was a kind of back and forth with Judy, because obviously Laszlo's designs are her designs. So there was that kind of that interplay and that discussion. And then it's interesting because one of the very earliest, I think the second scene of the movie, but the one that people remember uh, most strongly is Laszlo's arrival in New York, and he's in this ship, and he's in the bowels of this ship. You don't really know at first. It's dark, it's windowless, it's disorientating. I mean, in some ways, that is him in the cell.
That's what we said,
Yeah,
Karsten.
and then he's coming through all these different people, and it's all disorientating. And there weren't really that many background actors that we had, but a lot of them were dancers as well. So there's almost kind of this fold. They were kind of jumping off these bunk beds. There wasn't a great deal of design that was happening in that space. It was basically a ship that was moored in Budapest and was in the process of being changed into like a nightclub, like these floating nightclubs that you get. So
Yeah.
really, it was about denial of light. So within that sort of dark space, Judy and her team constructed these kind of rows of bunk beds that were really only sort of like four bunk beds wide, and they were sort of running the length of the ship. And then Adrian, the blocking was such that Adrian was moving through these, and then people were sort of choreographed to sort of leap, in front of and behind him. I mean, in some ways, it's sort of like this wasn't a direct influence, but it reminds me a little bit of Son of Saul, that idea of kind of like the idea of being focused on a character and you get a sense of other things happening around him and in the deep background, but it's very disorientating because you never throw focus to it and things like that, So
and a very nice callback to the end of Childhood of a Leader.
Yes, exactly. And then and this kind of idea of, I mean, I've referred to it as a sort of untethered camera, but by the end of the scene, I mean, not wishing to jump ahead, but essentially that film progresses and that scene progresses, and then you end up with a sort of an ascendancy, and this idea, and the light, the color temperature of the light changes. You realize there's daylight that they're all kind of reaching for, and then I follow Adrian up with a handheld camera, and I'm literally sort of like pulling myself up these steep steps with one hand and then operating with the other. And then, as you mentioned, I assume this is the bit you're referring to, but when you finally get out onto the deck of the ship and we reveal the tumbling Statue of Liberty, I mean, the very idea that it's like supposed to be terra firma and hope and stability, and this idea of this thrusting America is anything but that for Laszlo. It's tumultuous. It's ultimately turns out to be very contradictory and conflicted.
It's upside down.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, it's so it's these ideas. A lot of the like we shot the Statue of Liberty a certain way, and then Brady and David really sort of played with it. I mean, it was based on a discussion. The Statue of Liberty always existed but it wasn't shot. I mean, the difference is I didn't shoot that with a tumbling camera. We shot that with VistaVision, and then editorial, it became this choice of how to represent it.
Got it. Well, another scene that I feel like just speaks volumes with its visuals is the Carrera marble mine sequence. And I told some Brutalist lovers, and by the way, us included, we didn't even say that at the top. We love this movie.
Thank you.
But any lovers of the film, we told them that we were interviewing you and asked if they had any questions. And to a man or woman, everyone wanted to know about the Carrera marble mine sequence in Italy. And I'm taken by the awesome, sublime power of it juxtaposed with what occurs there.
Yes. Yeah.
And also, it's the first time the film, maybe there are other times, but to me, it's when the film's really experimenting with this dreaminess that reminded me of Bernardo Bertolucci films. Yeah. And I'm just wondering if you could discuss how you approached the sequence, what you were trying to achieve, and how you feel about how it turned out.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that you picked up on that. I mean, I have to say, I'm super proud of the film, but that's the one sequence whenever I watch the film again, I'm sort of exhilarated and excited to get into that portion of the film, because I just find it's a very pivotal moment in the movie, as you know, and it's sort of there's a lot to unpick and discuss, really. But I think it's one of the times where we shot the movie VistaVision, but there are some sequences like on the boat where I shot with the 235 35mm camera, so just out of necessity. But it's one moment where we're first introduced to Carrera with these sort of Herzogian, almost kind of like landscape shops, or these kind of like Sebastio, these like sort of Sebastio Salgado kind of images, I mean, they are. I mean, the idea of the brutalist is a very interesting play on words, because there's a lot of brutality in the film, and this is one example of man's brutality to the landscape. I mean, it's an attack on the landscape, and guess what? It's the backdrop for one of the most the most brutal physical act in the movie, right? So it always existed in the script that way. The one thing that I would say that was different was it was a 2-day shoot that we did at the end of the film. So with a pared down crew, we lost the Steadicam. It became available light. It became handheld. It was a combination of VistaVision and a smaller handheld camera. And when we arrive, I mean, the big draw to go there is to be able to see the landscape, right? So the scene that we had with Adrian and Guy being led through the marble quarry, that day all of the fog came in and it socked in completely, and we couldn't see it, and we were kind of devastated that it was that way. But it's one of those really interesting things that now an audience and myself and Brady couldn't imagine it any other way. I mean, you're right. It has this kind of dreamlike quality, and they're being led through, and the guy leading them is talking about beating the corpse of Mussolini and things.
Yeah, and then when he pours the water on the marble to reveal the better color of it,
and this sort of this
cool.
fetishistic quality that Guy that Van Buren has for the marble, is really interesting, and it does. I mean, and also like the party scene that comes after that, it has this kind of Fellini-esque quality as well, with the sort of the handheld camera and the music and the sort of interplay and the flirtations. And I mean, I find that sequence folds really well into each other, and then you have this sort of formalism within that party scene. You have this kind of this formal way of portraying Van Buren as he's just staring down voyeuristically, at and with sort of disdain and sort of, I don't know. I mean, there's a whole number of things going on in Van Buren's head at this moment.
It's fantastic.
I mean, it's power, it's aggression, it's disdain, it's disgust. It's I mean, in many ways, almost like anything but sexual. It's kind of interesting, kind of like that whole, without wishing to give too much away, but it's like it's not about that. It's about ownership in some way. It's kind of very interesting, that whole obviously the culmination of that scene. So yeah, it was a whole combination of Steadicam and shooting from a tripod, but very sort of rudimentary equipment, because it was a working the Carrera mine was a working mine. So we had to really be quite a lean shooting crew.
Yeah, that kind of leads into this next question, which is, you guys don't storyboard, is that right?
No, not. I think the only time we've ever storyboard was with the dome sequence in the, because it's by necessity. There's so many moving parts. There were stunt crews. There were, there was VFX, SFX. Everybody had. So we had several meetings, incrementally getting closer to the solution. And so we did storyboard that. But I think both Brady and I feel in hindsight that if we could have avoided it, it's. I was thinking about this yesterday. This one sequence, and I think the problem is that you slightly get. You're slightly looking at the storyboard. I mean, the way we work is we have a certain openness to responding to what the environment and the performances are doing in relation to the script at any one time. And I think it becomes quite prescriptive with having a storyboard, before you go into it, and it slightly denies that ability to kind of respond in the moment, which is part of the energy and life and sensibility, I guess, that people get from the films that we've done together.
Yeah. I mean, a lot's been made about the budget of this film being $10 million and how phenomenal it looks. And you also shot some more expensive movies. We don't have to name them. They're also great. But, how do you stretch that $10 million budget to make this look so good? What are some of the shortcuts or sacrifices? And I'd love to know how that compares and contrasts with working on more expensive films like you have in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like all of these things you sort of fit, economically and schedule wise, you often fit to fill the time and resources you have. It's as it's rare for sort of people to. I mean, it does happen, but it's a rarity when people come in with, but with days to spare or money to spare. Generally
Right.
you work to your limits, what you have. But I think the biggest thing to say is like in terms of how you achieve this for around 10 million for um, 33 days of filming is preparation,
Yep.
what you see in the movie is pretty much what we shot. Like Brady doesn't overcover scenes, as sometimes it'll just be one shot, and one very ambitious shot that barely fits onto a roll of film, um, and then other times it's 2, 3, 4 setups or something like that, Brady, from the first movie that we did together, it was clear to me that he was an incredibly assured filmmaker. Um, Not a lot of head scratching. There's not a lot of tying oneself up in knots. Um,
Yeah. I heard him in an interview say that it's Mona who helps him like push through, at least with story, when he's debating things on a philosophical
Interesting.
level. She's great because she's just like, we got to keep going,
Yes. Yes.
So
Well, I mean,
it's
yeah,
funny to me.
because there's a lot of intellectualization in his film,
Absolutely.
and I think it's also important that things don't become too intellectualized because then you lose an audience. It's like at the end of the day, you still have to have that balance between thematics and things, adult ideas and themes that you're trying to explore, but you don't want it to become a thesis.
Yep. You don't want to be
No,
didactic, which it isn't. Yeah.
and so coming back to your question, we basically kind of like we have a very similar taste, and we tend to like to work a lot, if not naturalistically, an available light, then with an aesthetic that feels often naturalistic and things like that. So there's not a lot of debate about that. Um, and yeah, the other thing I think in terms of like this film having, if your suggestion was that this film has a kind of grandeur to it, and I think it does in the sense that it has like explores decades and decades of a fictitious person's life and things. I think the other thing is we don't. I mean, we're looking at it now, but we don't get into that too much. Often a lot of our frames we're framing the space and letting the actors inhabit that space. We do have close-ups in the film, but I think, I suppose the point I'm making is that allowing the frame to breathe a little bit and to explore both environment and character within a frame is something that is absolutely integral to the history of cinema, and so we don't get too televisual. I mean, television has become an incredibly articulate and sophisticated medium. So I'm not denigrating it, but I'm just saying there's the ability with cinema to celebrate a space and celebrate a
Yeah.
performance
I,
without
I,
having to
I
get
get,
right in here all the time.
right. I get what you're saying. For me, that would probably be like the when he's celebrating with Attila and his wife, and that's when I first felt like it's a small space. This scene could be pretty average in so many other movies, but there's like a magic here to this.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, I love that. That's one of my
Yeah,
favorites as well because I think within the film, I mean, Brady's spoken about this idea of sort of maximalism and minimalism. There is this kind of maximalist quality, the Vista Vision, the Carrera quarries. There are big, grand, sort of almost operatic gestures in certain elements of the film, but then within that, there's also these very sort of intimate moments of handheld and and real connection with the performance. I hope, but it doesn't. The feedback I'm getting is that these things aren't disparate. They feel cohesive. It still feels like the same movie. And we were very technically, we were really conscious of trying. Like when we had the VistaVision, we started shooting the test on the VistaVision. We started to realize, this can get a little clean. This can almost feel a little too clean for the movie, and we tend to underexpose our film stock and push process it and abuse it in some way in all three films in order to get more of what we would describe as a sort of painterly, pictorial, aesthetic, almost impressionistic sometimes, in a way in the hope that will support a period, because all three movies are period films, So the danger was that if we shot with an image, with something with such high resolution, that it was going to take us out of it. But I think we succeeded in kind of in achieving both.
A little bit on that, the intimate and epic balance. What was the vibe like on set? To put it plainly, like was there a feeling that you were going for something large and sprawling, or was it kind of like a taking it one scene at a time?
I think it's I think my experience of the most successful films, or the most successful cohesion, sense of everybody serving the same thing. I mean, everybody needs a director. It's not just everyone needs direction. It's not just actors. We all need direction. We all need to be directed, and it's about trust. I mean, the first day, the first afternoon, it was 2 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, and we did the jazz scene, which is and Isaac's character is high, as is Adrian, and all it's supposed to be this hedonistic jazz club with Class A drugs and alcohol, and we're doing that at 2 p.m. on day one on a Tuesday, when it's supposed to feel like 2 a.m. on a Saturday, and I had a handheld camera, film camera with a 10 mil lens, so it's kind of not fisheye, but certainly distorted. And I'm on my back, sort of whipping the camera from Adrian across, and it's hot, and there's kind of like tungsten lights, and there's no windows, and I'm sweating, and Brady and I are sort of screaming in the nicest possible way to encourage actors to, because not actors, but you have the background, and the idea is that they're supposed to go to a bar, get a drink, come over. You're trying to kind of orchestrate this chaos, and people are self-conscious, and they don't want to be doing the wrong thing, and they're not drunk, everyone's sober, and I think the way we achieved that, I think, my memory is that Daniel he'd already scored that section, and he had a jazz band playing, and so that was playing throughout. So that was inspiring me with my camera movement. It was hopefully inspiring the actors. Brady and I were sort of like, screaming directions to everybody over the top of it. And I think my recollection is that it set a tone. I definitely feel that by the end of that, it was like, okay, all right, what we're doing. Okay. And I think, it's like, I certainly felt that Adrian responded in that way, and Isaac, and it was just like, all right, these guys are serious. And I think that kind of setting that tone and that calibration early on is kind of really important, and people, you're sort of like setting the bar, and then, and you have to define this stuff very early on. And then once there's that trust and everyone's calibrated together, you can head off, and hopefully by day 33, you're all still on the same track,
I think you got on the same track. Lowell, we have a few more questions for you. This has been great. We hope you haven't been asked these before. We just want to have a little bit of fun.
Sure.
So I am quite certain that Laszlo, as he went on with his life and career and for a little downtime, was a movie lover. And I wanted to run through some popular films that Laszlo may have seen, and I want you to let me know if you think he would have liked these, how he would have felt about them, if you're up for this.
He would have hated The Fountainhead, by the way.
Okay. How would Laszlo felt about The Godfather 1 and 2?
It's an amazing question. I think. Oh wow! I think he would have liked them both. Which one would have had the edge? Second one. Controversial?
No, he was seeing much of himself in it, I'm sure. How about Lawrence of Arabia in 1962? Would he have enjoyed that one?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think he would have particularly enjoyed. You remember this? Remember at the very beginning, where Peter O'Toole has the bike accident, which ultimately kills him. Right, it's the death of
Yep.
Lawrence. But it's at the very beginning. You have this kind of intense boiling camera work, and I think he would have. I think he would have loved that scene.
Okay, so how about a few from his fellow countrymen? Because there are a lot of great Hungarian
Yeah.
filmmakers. How about The Deer Hunter, shot by fellow Hungarian cinematographer Vilmos Zsigmond?
I think he would have. I think he would have liked that, but maybe a little too much. Maybe the Pennsylvanian element would have just been a little close. You know, needed a little
True.
time to adjust.
And
A
then,
huge Bellatar fan.
oh, of course, he's got the
Yeah.
time and patience for that. Um, and then, lastly, how about a Laszlo Kovacs shot movie like Easy Rider?
I don't think he would have liked Easy Rider. Don't know. I think a little too. Little, maybe a little. Would have considered maybe a little unfocused. I don't
Yeah.
know. And also,
Maybe Jofia's calling him from Israel, like, you gotta see Easy Rider. And he's just like, nope,
well,
no, I will
also, I'm
not.
not sure. You know, we. You know, I'm not sure he was an LSD guy. You know.
No.
No, he's more of a heroin
Yeah,
guy.
it's a little, I don't
Yeah.
know. I think a little too. Yeah, I'm not sure he'd be a big fan of that.
All right, well, that was fun. More to chew on for the listeners if they want to think of
Yeah.
more Laszlo Toth favorite films. What are your favorite movies of the year besides your own film, hopefully, of 2024? I know we're in 2025
Oh yeah.
now.
Well, Anora, I really enjoyed. Uh, Different Man, I was a big, really big fan of, and also The Apprentice. Big fan
Yep,
of Sebastian's as well. Yeah.
incredible.
What else? Conclave and I really enjoyed the cinematography of Nosferatu. Dune, of course. Greg's works fantastic. Yeah, Robbie Ryan. I'm always a big fan of Robbie's work. He's got a couple there this year. So yeah.
All right, stop practicing your, best cinematography speech, Joel. Save it for the Oscars. Come on, Um,
Oh,
Um,
Tell you what, Kneecap. Love Kneecap.
love Kneecap.
yeah. Yeah. I'm curious what I feel like there's so many different trends going on in cinematography right now. Like film is having a big moment, specifically like I feel like I've seen a lot of really great like 16 millimeter
Yeah,
projects these
yeah,
days.
yeah.
Do you have any hopes for like the future of cinematography? Like any directions you hope to see it go in? Like more film, more
I think
I guess like IMAX, like
Yeah, I actually saw an IMAX version of The Brutalist, which was insane. I was
yeah,
kindly invited to the facility to
Wow.
see the IMAX DCP. It's wild, really, really, really wild.
yeah.
I think I think it's just about trying not to have our palette restricted. I mean,
Mhm.
I understand the economics to a certain degree. I think having done it long enough, but I think having the ability to shoot on high 8, Super 8, all the way through to IMAX. If there's some way that economically we can keep these options open. I mean, I was a really big fan of Anthony Dodd Mantle's work, and I'm a big fan of his work still. But he was sort of like Chris Doyle, Anthony, Robbie Ryan when I first kind of started out. Where um, I was just really, I like the aesthetic, but I also like their sort of punk attitude as well. And I like the fact that Anthony seemed like someone who was like, it wasn't like, oh, I only shoot 35. He's like, well, what is the format that's going to best serve this story? So movies like Feston and Julian Donkey Boy and things like that. And then I think after that, as much as as much as we can all absolutely celebrate the Alexas, the Sony Venices and things, I think that what happened was that with the advent of digital cinematography, everything tried to emulate 35 mil, and so I excuse me, I think it's like, I think keeping all those options, those aesthetic choices is the most important thing for me. And of course, keeping shooting film. I try to shoot film whenever I can and celebrate film whenever I can.
Yeah.
Last question, Lowell. You've been so generous with your time. Do you have any movies or directors you return to every few years to remind you why you love filmmaking and cinema so much, or are you always watching new things?
Well, of course, I'm always trying to watch new things, but I think there's I mean, Wim Wenders and Robbie Mueller. I always get stuff out of Robbie Mueller's work. Chris Doyle, like In the Mood for Love, obviously, and I think and Anthony's work and Robbie. There's definitely I know what I'm good at, and I know what I'm not so good at, and I think that's fine. I think I think if you can excel in one aesthetic choice or sensibility or something, then then that's fine. I think I basically kind of like, the point I'm trying to make is I think all of those cinematographers share. I recognize something, and I feel like I understand something in all of their work. And it's less about lighting; it's more about composition and camera movement and response with the performance and things like that. So I tend to gravitate. I just enjoy it because I kind of recognize something. It's like returning to listening to music or something, and certain albums that it's hard to kind of pick at, and maybe it's the wrong thing to pick at, but you just know that it nourishes in some way and satisfies something.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, Lowell, that's it from us. We really appreciate you taking the time. This was awesome chatting with you. We're going to be rooting for you in The Brutalist over the next few weeks and the awards and whatnot. And Karsten, anything from you to close?
Just thank you for the time. It was an honor. Yeah. Really love your work.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.